At some point in your life, you are going to want to stop working. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not for another 20 years, but at some point, the alarm going off at 6 a.m. is going to feel less like a routine and more like a personal attack. And when that day comes, you are going to need a number, a specific dollar amount sitting somewhere earning money while you do absolutely nothing. Most people have no idea what that number is. They have a vague sense that they should probably save more, a general feeling that retirement is something they will figure out eventually. Eventually is not a financial plan. Eventually is how people end up working until they physically cannot anymore. Today, we're going to figure out your actual number, the math behind it, what it means, and how to actually get there. Let's get into it. Before we get into the number, we need to talk about how retirement actually works, because most people have a completely wrong picture of it in their head. They imagine retirement as this magical moment where they stop working and money just appears, like the universe owes them a paycheck for showing up for 40 years. It does not. When you retire, your income does not come from nowhere. It comes from the pile of money you built while you were working. That pile has to be big enough to pay you every single month for the rest of your life, which could be 20 years, could be 35 years, could be longer. You do not get to know in advance, which makes this math genuinely interesting. The goal is to build a pile so large that it generates enough income on its own that you never have to touch the actual pile itself. Just live off the returns forever. That is the game, and most people are not playing it nearly seriously enough. So how do you figure out the number? There is a concept called the 4% rule, and it is the closest thing to a universal answer that exists. Here is how it works. Historically, the stock market has returned somewhere around 9 to 10% annually over long periods. After accounting for inflation, that real return drops to roughly 6 to 7%. Research from Trinity University found that if you withdraw 4% of your portfolio per year, your money has historically lasted 30 years or more in almost every market scenario, including crashes, recessions, and the absolute worst periods in market history. 4% withdrawal rate. Portfolio survives. That is the rule. So to find your number, you just flip the math. Take whatever you need to live on per year and divide it by 0.04. That gives you the portfolio size that can support that lifestyle indefinitely. Simple, clean, and most people have never done this calculation in their life, which is honestly a little terrifying when you think about it. Let's run some real numbers, because this is where it gets either exciting or uncomfortable. Probably uncomfortable, but that's kind of the point. Say you need $40,000 a year to live comfortably. $40,000 divided by 0.04 equals $1 million. You need $1 million invested to support a $40,000 a year lifestyle indefinitely. Need $60,000 a year? That's $1.5 million. Need $80,000 a year? That's $2 million. Need $100,000 a year to maintain the lifestyle you have built? Congratulations, you need $2.5 million. Take a second to let that sink in, and then take another second to check what's actually in your retirement account right now. If there is a significant gap between those two numbers, you are not alone. Most people are nowhere close. Not because they are lazy or irresponsible, but because nobody sat them down at 22 and showed them this math. Instead, someone said, just save whatever you can and you will be fine. Fine is not a number. Fine does not pay rent when you are 74. Now let's talk about Social Security, because this comes up every single time. Yes, Social Security exists. No, you should not be counting on it to save you. The average Social Security benefit in 2026 is around $1,900 a month. That is $22,800 a year. If you are trying to live on that alone, you are going to have a very long and very unpleasant retirement. The average American tries to survive retirement on Social Security and whatever they scrape together. The result is 40% of retirees rely on Social Security for essentially all of their income. These are people in their 70s and 80s hoping the government does not cut their check. That is not retirement. That is just being broke with more free time. Social Security should be the bonus on top of your number, not the plan itself. If your retirement strategy depends entirely on a government program staying exactly as it is forever, that is a very fragile foundation to build the rest of your life on. Let's talk about when you want to retire, because the timeline changes everything. The traditional retirement age is 65. That is what most people default to. But there is a growing movement called FIRE, Financial Independence Retire Early, and it has completely reframed how a lot of people think about this number. The idea is simple. Hit your number as fast as possible and stop trading time for money, whether that is at 40, 45, or 50 instead of waiting until 65. The math is the same. The timeline is just compressed. And compressing the timeline requires a higher savings rate, sometimes dramatically higher. To retire at 65, most traditional advice says save 10 to 15% of your income. To retire at 50, you are probably looking at 40 to 50%. To retire at 40, you are probably looking at 60 to 70%. That sounds insane until you realize that every year you do not have to work is a year of your life you get back, and years of your life are worth considerably more than whatever your employer is paying you for them. The question is not whether early retirement is possible. The question is how much of your current lifestyle you are willing to trade for future freedom. That is a personal answer, but it is worth actually asking yourself. Here is where most people completely derail their retirement math without realizing it. They calculate what they need based on their current expenses, and then they forget that current expenses are not fixed. Healthcare alone can add thousands of dollars a month in retirement, especially if you retire before 65 and lose employer-sponsored insurance. In 2026, the average healthcare cost for a retired couple is estimated at around $315,000 over their lifetime. That number is not in most people's retirement calculations. Neither is inflation, which quietly erodes purchasing power every single year. $80,000 a year today will feel like significantly less in 20 years at even modest inflation rates. Neither is long-term care, which nobody wants to think about. But the average cost of a nursing home in 2026 is over $100,000 a year, and most people will need some form of long-term care at some point. The point is, your number is probably bigger than you think it is. Factor in healthcare, factor in inflation, factor in the unexpected, build in a buffer, because the one thing retirement does not forgive is running out of money. Let's talk about what actually gets people to the number, because this is the actionable part. And I want to be specific because vague advice is just motivational content with a spreadsheet attached. The single biggest lever you have is your savings rate, not your investment returns, not which stocks you pick, your savings rate. Here is what that looks like in practice. Someone saving 10% of a $60,000 salary is putting away $6,000 a year. At a 9% average return over 30 years, that grows to roughly $900,000. Decent. Not quite enough for most people, but decent. Now, take that same person and bump the savings rate to 20%. Same salary, same return, same timeline. Now they end up with roughly $1.8 million, double the outcome, just by saving double the percentage. The investments did not get better. The salary did not change. The savings rate changed. That is it. And if you can get to 30%, you are looking at $2.7 million over that same period. The difference between a comfortable retirement and a genuinely free one is often just a few percentage points of savings rate sustained over time, which means the lifestyle choices you make in your 30s and 40s are directly writing the story of what your 60s and 70s look like. That is either motivating or terrifying depending on where you currently are. Probably both. Now, let's talk about where the money actually goes, because this matters enormously. Tax-advantaged accounts exist for a reason, and most people are not using them correctly. Your 401k, your Roth IRA, your HSA if you have access to one. These are not just savings accounts with a different name. They are legally protected wealth-building machines that the government created, and most people are either underusing or ignoring entirely. In 2026, you can contribute up to $23,500 to a 401k, up to $7,000 to a Roth IRA, and up to $4,300 to an HSA if you have a qualifying health plan. That is potentially $34,800 a year in tax-advantaged space. Most people are not coming close to that, and every dollar that sits in a regular taxable account instead of one of these is a dollar getting taxed in ways it did not have to be. Taxes are one of the biggest silent drains on long-term wealth building, and they are almost entirely avoidable with the right account structure. If you do not know the difference between a traditional and Roth 401k, or why an HSA is arguably the most powerful retirement account available, that is a knowledge gap that is costing you real money right now. Let's talk about the sequence of withdrawals in retirement, because this one is counterintuitive. Most people assume they just hit the number and start pulling money out. The order in which you pull from different accounts can add or cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Generally speaking, the conventional wisdom is to withdraw from taxable accounts first, then tax-deferred accounts like traditional 401ks and IRAs. Then Roth accounts last, since those grow tax-free and have no required minimum distributions. The goal is to manage your taxable income in retirement strategically, keep it low enough to stay in lower tax brackets, potentially do Roth conversions in years when your income is lower, coordinate with Social Security timing to minimize the overall tax hit. This stuff is genuinely complex and genuinely worth understanding, because getting the withdrawal sequence wrong can cost you 5 or 6 figures over a retirement, which is a lot of money to leave on the table because nobody explained the order of operations. Here is the honest reality check that most retirement content skips over. Most people are not on track. The median retirement savings for Americans in their 50s is around $87,000. For people in their 60s, it is around $130,000. Using the 4% rule, that $130,000 generates about $5,200 a year. That is $433 a month. Combined with average Social Security, that gets you to roughly $2,300 a month. In 2026, with healthcare costs, with inflation, with 20 plus years potentially left to live, that math does not work, which is either very depressing or very motivating depending on your personality. The goal of sharing that number is not to make you feel bad, it is to make the stakes feel real, because abstract advice about saving more never moves anyone, but seeing the actual gap between where most people are and where they need to be has a way of making the boring, disciplined choices feel a lot more urgent. So what do you actually do with all of this? Step 1. Calculate your number right now. Figure out what you actually spend per year or what you want to spend in retirement. Multiply by 25. That is your target portfolio size using the 4% rule. Write that number down. Look at it. Let it feel real. Step 2. Find out where you actually are. Add up every retirement account, every investment account, every relevant savings account. The gap between step 1 and step 2 is what you are working to close. Step 3. Calculate your savings rate and figure out how to increase it. Even going from 10% to 15% compounded over 20 years is a transformational difference. Step 4. Make sure every dollar is in the right account in the right order. Max the employer match first, then Roth IRA, then back to the 401k, then taxable. Step 5. Leave it alone and let time do the work. The people who build enough to stop working are not financial geniuses. They are just people who started, stayed consistent, and did not panic every time the market moved. That is genuinely the whole strategy. It is boring, it is slow, it works. Here is the thing about this number that nobody tells you. The day you hit it is not going to feel like you thought it would. There is no parade, no trophy, no moment where the universe acknowledges what you did. You just look at the account one day and realize the math works, that you could stop if you wanted to. And that quiet realization, that you have options now, is worth every boring, consistent month it took to get there. Start calculating your number today. Not next week, not after the next raise. Today. The sooner you know what you are actually working toward, the sooner every financial decision you make starts pointing in the right direction. If this video helped you actually figure out your number, share it with someone who needs to do the same math. Subscribe if you're not already. I'll catch you in the next one.